Khanna, though, still celebrates what the administration is doing for 40 million students or former students who have those bills to pay, that they're going to get some break. Khanna, of course, the Democratic California Congressman, kind enough to join us right now to Washington. Congressman, with all the warts and all the problems and all the people who are not included in this, and those who paid their debts but are not going to get any reward with something like this, you still like it?
I do. It benefits a lot of people in the working class and in the middle class. Remember, many people who take out these loans are the first in their family to go to college. They're kids of working class families, and it's providing actual relief. So I am for the policy.
What about the people who are also part of the working class who get squat out of this?
Well, we should do other things to help them. We can cancel medical debt. We can make sure that there is a credit that can be used for vocational education or make community college free, where many people take classes. But that's not part of this.
That's not part of this at all.
Yeah, well, I agree that we need to be doing more. I mean, look, even to become an auto mechanic these days, you have to take a course often in technology. And I would say let's have a $10,000 credit for anyone who wants to do that. And the loans are forgiven, by the way, for vocational education. But federal loans, as you know, are not used as much for vocational education. So let's expand vocational education to cover it.
What's to stop, though, Congressman, a college or a university from just continuing to do what they've done for decades now, just keep raising their tuition, room and board prices, because now they know prospective students, their debt obligation just went down?
It's an important issue, and that's why I have proposed that we have public college be free and those grants be tied to not having large tuition increases. That's actually what we had in this country from 1860 to 1960. The land-grant universities were basically free. Then we had state budget cuts. But if we go back to that and tie the money to not having inflation increases beyond inflation, then you would get the cost of college under control.
What about just the concept when you enter into an agreement with a bank or a lender and you sign off on it, you're not an idiot, right? You're obligated to pay it back. And if that has been broken, that pact has been broken, what's to stop others from similarly wanting to break it?
Well, Neil, look, I took out over $100,000 of student loans. I paid them back. But I don't think that that's the right type of society. What other country makes you go $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in debt to get an education? I just don't think that's what's going to make us competitive.
Well, many do, though. Many do pay those off. Many do recognize that when someone gives you money, there's an agreement to pay it back. And you're quite right to say these sums can be staggering. But what you do for some, do you do for all, or do you now open the gate to people who are, 20 million plus Americans now, Congressman, who are behind on the utility payments, or the 30 million who might be behind on their mortgage and or car payments? Where do you stop?
I think education is a public good. Just like we don't charge people for kindergarten, we don't charge people for high school. I don't think we should be charging people for vocational education or college, public college, in a modern economy. If we want to compete with China.
That's not what I asked. What about these people who have these other obligations, also signed on the dotted line, and then all of a sudden now realize, all right, for this slither of people who are in this group that is, having trouble paying back their college loan, $10,000 up to $20,000 in forgiveness, I want some of that for me because I have a mortgage and homes are important. Or someone else says, I have a utility bill I can't afford, and being warm in the winter is important. What do you do?
Well, I think there's a difference between education and health care and whether you have a loan to buy a new car or to paying your electricity. I think in this country we have always said that we value public education. We have always said that there's some obligation of public health care, and that is what this is saying. In a modern economy,
but it's a moving target,
right?
I mean, when we came up with, the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, which had a lot of good features to it, the idea was that that was more a right than the privilege, and so we attached to it that. And I'm just wondering now, does this extend really beyond this loan relief to some college kids? As you said, you want to expand it to, other venues. So where does this stop? Because last time I checked, we're running a $30+ trillion debt.
We are, and the reason we have that debt is that we don't have taxes on the billionaires. In fact, we've been cutting the taxes. I mean, anyone who's talking about how we're going to pay for this should first explain how we were going to pay for the $2 trillion Trump tax cut. Why don't we ever ask this one?
But Congressman, come on, you could tax the billionaires at 100% everything they're taking in. That would not address the amount of money that we're spending, right? But I see it's easy to target a group and get money or try to siphon it from them, but it is not close to paying our obligations that are already going out. I don't see any appetite for that in Washington at all.
Well, it's not just the billionaires. If we reversed the Trump tax cuts on the affluent, on people over $400,000, you would raise a lot of revenue. Now, that's a philosophical debate.
And you would spend more revenue. You would spend that more revenue. You wouldn't do anything about the debt that's already piled up.
No, but we did with the Inflation Reduction Act. $300 billion of that went to deficit reduction. And
do you really believe that? That's like one of my commitments to lose weight. I hate to break it to you, Congress. You're a very thin and fit young man. You don't have to worry, but I make promises too. They've already said that $300 billion thing isn't adding up because it's already costing more.
Look, I am for making prudent financial decisions, but it is unfair to say that somehow the Democrats aren't doing that when the Republicans were running up.
Believe me, I'm a bipartisan ripper when it comes to this stuff. This is why, Congressman, both sides hate me so much, and I feel vulnerable, but it's okay. But I think you're quite right. Republicans and Democrats have gotten us knee-deep in all this red. I just wonder, how are we going to dig out of it? Because your goals are always very altruistic, very good and well-intended. But we can't afford them. And I don't see any effort to try to rein that in. I don't see any effort to try to remind people that when you sign on a dotted line to pay someone back and the government absolves you of that, what else will it absolve you of? And what else will it spend money on? And what else will it drag us deeper into the red? And then hanging on the notion that maybe if you tax rich guys to the full hilt, you'll be able to pay the bill when you know the math just doesn't add up.
Well, Neil, I think we have to distinguish from productive investment to just spending that's not productive. I believe that investing in education, investing in vocational training, investing in bringing back industry.
How is it productive then to give someone a $10,000 or $20,000 break on their bills, but a lot of other people no break on their bills? How is it productive for others who aren't getting a penny of this to underwrite that loan forgiveness? When they did everything right, when they did everything right, and now pissed off that these people are getting the fruit of their bounty.
Well, they're not underwriting it if you have progressive taxation on
no, you're
on the
paying
wealthy.
for this, Congressman, with debt.
But
you're paying for this. You've increased our credit line, our Visa credit line. There isn't cash paying for this. It's going on our debt. We all pay that. So our debt is paying for this. You've just increased our credit line.
But here's the reality, and you know this, most of these loans weren't being repaid. So what was happening? The people's credit was being destroyed. This isn't actually, that debt was already there. Now what we're saying is, okay, if you forgive it, you're going to not destroy people's credit so they can go work, they can get a home.
So they're getting rewarded. They're getting rewarded for holding off on paying back those loans. Reward the guy who's holding back on paying his utility bill. Reward the guy who bought a car and got in knee deep and didn't realize it. So you see what you're opening up here. Again, with the best of intentions.
Would you feel differently, Neil? Let's say we were charging for years for public high school, and then someone came along and said, you know what, we should have free public high school in this country, and we should forgive some of the debt of people who had to pay for high school. Would you feel differently then?
But that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is we're doing this, again, with all the right intentions. Don't get me wrong. I don't think you're an evil person or callous or an indifferent person. What you're losing sight of is paying for something by opening up a credit line and then bragging about, as the administration has, bringing our deficit down to only $1 trillion and saying your ship has come in and that better than $1 trillion that we brought the deficit down is good enough to pay for this. But it's not. It's not new money coming in. It's just tapping a Visa line with a MasterCard line. And it's our line.
Neil, it's our money. It's important for folks to understand that a lot of this money was not being repaid. These are often people who have not finished college, who did not have a job, who weren't repaying it. And so that deficit was already there. What the administration is saying is, by forgiving it, you're not going to destroy their credit so that they can go and be a functioning person of society.
But not everyone in the country is forgiven, right? I mean, someone pays for this. This notion that it's manna from heaven, it's just added to the debt. And that is something which all Americans share a responsibility responsibility and a part and a portion, right?
I agree, and the debt was there regardless. Now, what we can say is that the costs of college are too high, that we shouldn't be making people at 18 or 19 going $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in debt. And I say this, look, I say this as a son of immigrants who paid back the debt, but I don't resent or hold against other people who may not pay it, who didn't have the same breaks I did.
Well, there are a lot of people who resent that. I'm not being callous and indifferent to them. I had tons of student loans myself, and my wife as well. I hear where you're coming from, Congressman. But the message you're sending to everyone who did the right thing or tried to, and now they are now saddled with the debt, added to the debt on top of obligations that very few are taking advantage of, that they're looking at this and said, where's my piece of the pie? I get no pie.
Well, and I think we have to say that, first of all, a quarter of people who are going to college on student loans are coming from working class families. I've been to union halls where many people are doing fundraisers of how their kids are going to go to college.
So this is just a start for you, right? It's a step in that direction, more to come.
More to come on education and more to come for working families. And I think that that's what this country needs. We've lost, Neil, 25% of working class wealth since 1980. We've got to focus on building that back.
Well, the government just can't dole it out. But we'll talk about this another time. But Congressman, very good having you.
Always great.